And now, for the week of December 12th, Photoshop TV is on the air.
Welcome to Photoshop TV from the National Association of Photoshop Professionals. And here's your hosts, the Photoshop guys, Scott Kelby, Dave Cross, and Matt Kloskowski.
Welcome to yet another nefarious episode of Photoshop TV, brought to you by the National Association of Photoshop Professionals, or NAP, and sponsored by Wacom. Go to wacom.com/tips for some amazing Photoshop tips for beginners, intermediate users, and advanced users, and check out their cool tablets.
Also, Digital Lifestyle Outfitters. Go there, check out DLO.com, and you can check out the Home Dock for the iPod.
Right, and also iStockPhoto.com, the fastest growing collection of stock photography, iStockPhoto.com.
All right, and look, we are the only set to have actually the Home Dock on our set. See, look, iPod, ooh.
Docking.
Dropping. Okay. Uh-oh. And this is the one we'll be sending.
Durable.
This is the one we'll be sending. Okay, maybe we'll send one in a box. Anyway, welcome to our show. Hey, I've got good news. The Photoshop guys are no longer flying the missing man formation.
Dave's back.
Dave is back.
I'm
Dave
so excited.
Cross. He's back from traveling and doing all his Photoshop seminars, and I think he's taking the rest of the month off.
Pretty much. I'll be here for the next while anyway.
Fantastic, and then in January he goes someplace else, but really who cares? Hey, joining also besides Dave Cross, as always, Matt Kloskowski.
Thank you. Welcome everybody. They're repeating it at home.
I know. They're saying in their minds, rocking the house ski.
Yes.
That's okay. Hey, I came up with the new one this way. Dave Krosky. Okay, it's bad. Anyway, but so you say Kloskowski. Anyway, hey, we've got a lot of cool stuff for you on this show, but first I want to show you this week's prize because we have a very cool prize. We're going to bring on Felix Nelson, the creative director of the National Association of Photoshop Professionals. Normally he'd be standing right off set, but apparently he's wandered away. So what we like to do is yell, Felix! Jeez, oh, peace. It's a highly scripted, professional thing. Here he comes now.
He was busy.
Yay, Felix, Felix. And so what you get, step into the frame here a little more. Okay, what you get is actually Felix comes to your house and does your laundry. No, actually Felix is wearing this week, so we'll turn around and just kind of model it. Yep, it's an Adobe backpack. Ooh. Now you can't get these in stores. You can't get them anywhere, only here on Photoshop TV. So let me just take this off your hands and show you what else is inside here, because what's inside here is Felix's laundry. No, we have some things here. Thank you, Felix. How about a nice hand for Felix?
Awesome job.
Being so timely and just like walking right on cue.
Right on cue.
Oh, man, okay. There's a way to open this, but it takes obviously some things. Okay, let's see if it's in here. Inside we have, yes, things. First, remember last week we talked about Terry White's brand new Secrets of the Adobe Bridge book? Well, you get that.
Nice.
Yes, you also get one of my books, the Photoshop CS2 book for digital photographers. And also in here, you get Matt's brand new DVD called Automating Photoshop CS2. It's all about making Photoshop fast and automated. Nice. So we'll pass that over there. And the bag. So you get all of it, every piece of it, in just a little while. Completely undamaged, brand new, factory sealed, never been touched by human hands. Okay, we're going to start things right off and throw to a tip from our buddy. Since he's been gone, he has to go first. Dave Cross, here's a tip from Dave.
All right, I have for you something that's kind of between a tip and it's kind of a reminder as well. It's sort of a tip, sort of a reminder.
So which is it, Dave? A tip or a reminder?
Well, it's both. It's a tip to remind you to take advantage of editing your own keyboard shortcuts. Now, let me show you an example why. I find personally that in Photoshop, I almost always use print with preview these days. I hardly ever just use the traditional old print command. And the problem is my fingers are still trained to press Command or Control P for print. And what I really want to do is go print with preview. So what occurred to me is a very simple solution would be to edit my keyboard shortcuts. So we'll just go to that command. And basically I just have to find it and go down to File and then Print. Down here you'll see there's all the different print commands eventually. There we go. And all I do is I take Print with Preview that currently wants to be Command Option P, which of course would be Control Alt P in Windows, and just change it to Command or Control P. And it's going to tell me that that's already in use. And I say that's okay because I want to make that my default way of printing. So now every time I use the good old Command P or Control P print command, it goes directly to Print with Preview.
Hey, thanks for that tip or reminder.
Or tip or reminder. Now, as an added bonus for those of you using Photoshop CS2, now when you create your keyboard shortcuts, you can include them in a workspace. So before, you can only save workspaces with the position of your floating palettes, but now you have the option of saving those keyboard shortcuts as part of your workspace.
Even better. Thank you, Dave, for starting off this carefully scripted show with a great tip right off the bat. Hey, we got some Photoshop news for you, but before we do the Photoshop news, I want to show you a little tip if you're watching Photoshop TV in iTunes. We have iTunes open up here. If you're watching us in this little tiny screen back here, you don't have to. Let me just show you a couple things. Number one is if you've subscribed to us on iTunes, if you just click on here, it jumps up to big size. So you can see here's last week's episode, and it's biggity big. Now, what's nice about this is, oh, stop, there's the black flippy screen. Okay, you can resize it. See, you can just drag the corner. Let's just move. Look, a tip from Matt. So
I like that guy.
Yeah, he's great. He's awesome. But anyway, you can resize it. But if you also want to, you can watch us full screen. Here's what you do: just go to iTunes Preferences and go up here to Playback. And at the very bottom, it'll say Play Windows in. Choose Full Screen. And then when you decide to watch Photoshop TV and you double-click on it, it will go full screen, giant Photoshop TV, and we look so much better at 300% pixelization. But anyway, there's a little tip for iTunes users on basically how to watch us big. Okay, now let's head over to Matt for some of the latest Photoshop news.
All right, got the news this week. First, I want to mention, I know I mentioned it last week, but I want to mention it again. It's the Peach Pit Meeting in a Box, and I want to mention it again because first, I got one this week. It's actual box. There's a meeting in here, and next up, it's free. So if you run a user group, definitely email Peach Pit and get a copy of this Meeting in a Box here. It's got conference discounts for Photoshop World. It's got free books. It's actually got a 2-hour video in here of Photoshop instructors taken from the show floor at Photoshop World. So you can kind of bring that experience to your user group. So you can email Peach Pit. It's even got candy inside here. Anyway, we're going to put the email address on the photoshoptv.com website. There we go. And next up, I want to take a second here to congratulate one of our own Photoshop guy, Scott Kelby. He doesn't know I'm doing this, but I got to do it because he got 3 very special honors this past week. And I just want to take a minute to mention them here. First, the Professional Photographers Magazine. Professional Photographers Magazine awarded Scott the prestigious Hot 1 Award for the Photoshop CS2 book for digital photographers. Also, Amazon, the editors from Amazon get together every year and they pick their top 10 favorite books. Well, Scott's book not only made it to the top 10 books, but it also made it it's the only Photoshop book in the top 10. So congratulations to Scott on that. And also on the Amazon topic, the customers, Amazon picks the top 10 customer picks for every year, and Scott's book is actually the #1 best-selling Photoshop book. So it made it into that top 10 as the #1 best-selling Photoshop book. So congratulations to Scott on all 3 of those honors. We're really proud of him. And next up, if you hadn't heard it already, the Adobe Macromedia merger is final. So it's been going on since like April. It's done. You can buy bundles of all the products. It's still kind of weird to see Photoshop and Fireworks and Dreamweaver and Go Live together, but hey, you can go to Adobe's website and buy the entire Adobe Macromedia bundle. And last up here, also, you might remember last week we talked about that little snapping shortcut where we wanted to temporarily turn it off. Well, it turns out one of the Adobe engineers, Jeff Tranberry, answered on our blog, there is no way to turn it off. There's not a PC shortcut for it. We knew the Mac one. We asked you guys for the PC one. There is no way. So we got Jeff Tranberry is visiting the blogs, and he said there isn't, but if anybody is the guy to get it done, Jeff said that he's going to see if he can get it fixed for the next release. Also, though, that's not the news part. The news is Jeff's got his own website at tranberry.com. A lot of great insider Photoshop stuff on there, so you can go check out his website. And finally, check out the, if you want to test your Photoshop knowledge, just go to photoshopuser.com and there's a link for Take a Test. It's the ultimate Photoshop quiz. So go check out your Photoshop knowledge there. That's it for me. Back to you guys.
Thank you, Matt. And by the way, that test, the ultimate Photoshop quiz, it's for fun. You don't get a certification, you don't get money, but you get that deep inner feeling that you know your stuff if you pass the test. Plus, if you pass the test, if you're in the top 20%, not just if you pass the test, but if you score in the top 20%, you get to go on and try the expert edition, the expert
super duper.
I'm
sure there's some name for it.
Yeah, there's the super smart. And considering that Dave, Matt, and I come up with the questions, it would be nice if we knew what the name was, but it's Super Smarty Guy, I think is what we settled on.
That's the official name.
No, something like that. Anyway, but go check that at photoshopuser.com. Just click on the little Ultimate Photoshop Quiz link and you're there.
Right. Now, coming up in a few moments, Matt will actually be answering questions that we got right from the blog at photoshoptv.com. But first, Scott, you have a tip for us, I do believe.
I do. I have a tip. Now, the tip we're going to do is a two-part tip. The first part is for CS2 users. The second is for everybody else using an earlier version of Photoshop. And it's a vignetting tip, so this is kind of a tip for photographers. And here's what we're going to do. First, we're going to use a new filter in Photoshop CS2 to create a vignetting effect. So let's go here under the filter menu, under distort, and you won't be able to see this because it's off screen, but there's a thing called lens correction. You can see the word lens. Pretend that after that is the word correction. And it brings up a dialog box that is luckily way too big to fit on screen. Now, the first thing you'll notice is what I like to call the annoying grid. The annoying grid button is way down at the bottom off screen, so pretend I'm clicking on something that says show grid. So that's the first thing, is to turn off the annoying grid. Now, the vignetting control in this lens correction is designed to help you remove vignetting from a cheap lens. But what I like to do is add it in for a nice effect. So it darkens the edges. Look how the edges move in and become dark. Okay, like that. And you can also control the midpoint, or basically how far in the vignetting goes, to create a nice kind of, it's almost like putting a little spotlight in the middle of your photo using this vignetting. When it looks good to you, click OK, and it applies the vignetting there. So here's a before and after, just applies a real nice little effect. It's almost like, again, like putting a soft spot right there. Now, that's how we do it in Photoshop CS2. In any previous version, let's go ahead and bring up the layers palette. There's another way you can do it. Just duplicate the layer, and then what you're going to do is switch the mode from normal to multiply. Multiply is going to make the whole image about twice as dark, like that. So you can see the before and after. Here's the original, then here's the darker version. What we're going to do is this. We're done with the layers palette. Now let's just kind of move it off screen. And by actually moving it, you have to click and actually move it. You just don't say it and it jumps off screen. There we go. We're going to make a selection. Let's go in here and make a selection about an inch inside the edges. Something like that. And now you have to feather the living daylights out of it. If you're using a low-res image like I am here, you can get away with a feather. Just go to feather and enter 50 pixels. If you're working on a high-resolution image, you want to use 170. So 50 for low-res, 170 for high-res. Click OK, and then just press the delete key on your keyboard, deselect, and you've got that nice vignetting effect. In fact, I'd have to actually say I think I prefer this method rather than just darkening in the corners. Take a look. Here's the before and after. There's the before, and what a nice little spotlight effect that puts on there. And you can see it's kind of burned in the edges a little bit. I think I like this particular way of doing it a little better even than the other way. So that's my tip, 2 different ways to apply edge vignetting to your photographs. All right, let's turn it over to Matt Koloskowski for his tip this week.
Yes, thank you, Scott. I not only have a tip, but I also have a tutorial.
Oh, no.
Hey, now.
Yes.
Now, you said that. Just a
Hey,
tip.
no complaining here. It's content for the user, for the viewers
double
out
dipping
there.
us.
It's all for the viewers. It's all for you guys. All right, so my tip is, if you're using the clone stamp tool, maybe the healing brush, maybe the spot healing brush, you're working on your photo. I see this question all the time. People don't want to damage the pixels in the original photo. Here's a trick to not only do that, but to put all your changes onto a new layer. So what you'll do is you've got your photo open. The first thing you want to do here is create a new layer. Then I'm going to select the healing brush tool over in the toolbox. And by itself, creating that new layer doesn't do anything. I can't do my changes onto this layer unless I click on the Sample All Layers button. It's up here at the top. There you go.
The Sample All Layers.
It's up here at the top in the options bar there. And then you can sample with the healing brush, I'm just going to alt-click and then just go through, fix your photo, do whatever fixes that you want to do here. I'm not going to spend too much time on them. We'll just get some of the main areas here. Just fix the photo, and then you'll see over here in the layers palette, that's before, that's after, and all my changes are on their own layer. So with the healing brush, if you went too far, you can always just drop the opacity down a little bit and start to bring in just a little bit of the texture of the face that was behind it. So that's my tip.
Okay, that's enough. Thank you, Matt.
No, it's too late, guys. I've already got my image open.
Man.
Come on, remember, it's all about the viewers.
Yeah.
Okay.
He's hogging FaceTime.
All right, so so this week I'm going to take the tutorial is going to take a look at a question that actually came from the blog. Somebody talked about using custom shapes. So let's see what we can do with custom shapes here. We're going to create this illustration all with custom shapes. So I'm going to just open up a new...
I don't think it can be done.
It's not possible.
I'm going to open up a new image here, 800 by 600, any size is fine. And the first thing I'll do is let's fill that background layer with a blue color. And then I'm going to select my custom shape tool here. And you'll notice there's a bunch of different ones. I'm going to choose the rectangle tool. Up in the options bar, I'm going to select the leftmost icon over here. That creates a shape layer. And then I'm just going to set my foreground color to black, and I'm going to draw out some rectangles here. And I've created one. Notice up in the options bar, there's a bunch of different icons for how the new shapes will interact with their old shape. So if I click on subtract from shape area, you'll see that if I draw another shape, it takes away from that shape area. So that's not what I want to do here. I want to add to the shape area. I don't want to keep creating a bunch of different shape layers. So click on the add button, and then come across here and just create a couple of different rectangles for the skyline for the buildings. And it doesn't really have to be perfectly straight because we're not going for that straight look.
Clearly.
So I'm just going to create some rectangles across the skyline here.
Ooh,
Notice
Chicago.
it looks like
It's Minneapolis.
no, it's Boston.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so there's the rectangles. Notice in the layers palette, they all got put onto the same layer. They're not separate shape layers. So now if I wanted to, I could always go to my toolbox here, select the direct selection tool, and I can still modify any one of these shapes by clicking on it and just dragging some of the individual anchor points there. So that's what you can do with the shape layer. So if you want to build the scene, just go over here, select your shape tool, just click off of that add to the icon, that add to the shape area icon. Click off of there, and maybe we'll create a moon in the background here. So just hold down the shift key. Whoops. Hold down the shift key. That creates a black moon. What you want to do is just double click on it and change that color to some kind of a soft yellow color. And then drag that one right below the top layer there, and we'll just move it up or move the buildings up.
Nice.
Floating buildings.
Nice. Got a lot of critics behind me.
Smooth.
Sorry. Sorry. All right, this time I'm really going to move. If I could turn off auto select layer. There we go.
We turned that on just to fool you.
Thank you, guys. They fooled me. All right, so now you move the moon behind here. And the rest of the image, it's just creating different shape layers. I can create another rectangle. I'll do it on top of the buildings here. And this will be the water. And I'll do the same thing. I'll just double click on it, and I've got a color for the water up here. And then you just, again, need to drag it on top of the buildings. We don't want it to show. And then lastly, I'll duplicate the skyline layer there. Go into free transform, Control T, and then just drag that guy down a little bit. Press the enter key and nudge it in there, and then we'll change the foreground color of that one just to kind of a lighter blue or a darker blue. And I'm really ruining this because
This is great.
I made the water the wrong color. There we go. Now we've got different water. Drag it below the building. So to recap, I've got my moon, I've got the skyline on top of it, the water, and then the buildings reflected in the water. Here's the cool part, though. There is a cool part.
All right.
I did it with custom shapes, so I can go to image size, and I can increase this thing as big as I want.
Make it big, man.
Make it big, and look at that. See how crisp those edges were? I just made it from 800 to 32. So I can make it as big as I want, and there's one more thing here. I'm going to go into Illustrator, and I happen to have a lot of layers in the way, or a lot of palettes in the way here, but I can go into Illustrator, and I've got the NAP logo here. I can select this logo. I'm going to copy it. I'm going to go back into Photoshop, and then I'm going to paste. And when I paste,
And when you paste,
did
you copy it?
I did copy.
Did you?
When I paste it, there we go.
Hey.
I get this paste as dialog, and what I do here is just pick shape layer, click OK, and now it pastes it in as a shape layer. It's all black. It doesn't work with colors as shape layers, but it's all black. And if I want to, the last thing, I can make this a custom shape, edit, define custom shape, give it a name, and then after I do that, it'll show up in my custom shape palette whenever I want to use that custom shape inside Photoshop. So that's my horribly scripted way at trying to address some of our viewers' questions from the blog site. So there's my tip and tutorial. Back to you, Scott.
Thank you, Matt. And if that doesn't scare you off of shape layers, really, what will?
Yes.
Okay, don't go away because we've got lots of stuff still coming up on the show. First, we've got to find out who won last week's contest. We've got to find out what this week's contest is all about. And of course, you saw the prizes earlier from our man Felix Nelson. We've got some more tips. We've got some more important stuff. But before we do that, it's time for Dave Cross's world famous Photoshop trivia question.
All right, this week on Trivia, we actually have kind of a two-part trivia question for you, and it is, who are the goddesses of the 10th floor, and how do you find out? And we'll have the answer for you in around 30 seconds right after this.
Photoshop training videos? You can learn at your own pace. Each of the titles is focused so you get just what you want. Leading Photoshop gurus and the best-selling authors on the planet are your featured instructors. And the great thing is that with Fast Forward and Rewind, you learn at the speed that's right for you. Just stop by photoshopvideos.com.
Adobe Japan のトチヤムネオです。トッチーです。あなたは、Photoshop TV を見ています。
All right, so this week we had that two-part question, who are the goddesses of the 10th floor and how do you find out? Well, the goddesses of the 10th floor, I had to write this down so I didn't say their names wrong, are Samantha Wallace and Lucy Neshimura. And you find this out by going to the About Photoshop splash screen. If you wait long enough, it starts scrolling, and after it gets through a whole bunch of credits, you will see some more interesting things, including the goddesses of the 10th floor. So there you go, this week's trivia. And now, it's back to Scott for another tip.
Thank you, Dave, for that smooth introduction. All right, this tip is for photographers. The tip is basically for people who are used to the rule of thirds. If you shooting in the camera, of course, professional photographers will keep in mind this rule of thirds. You visually split your camera into thirds, and then you try to place things like the horizon in the top third or the bottom third, or you try to put a subject of interest in one of the corners where they intersect. You don't want to put your subject or your horizon line in the middle of the photo because that says snapshot with quotes around it. So here's how to do it after the fact in Photoshop. So if you forgot to do it in the camera, here's a trick to do it in Photoshop. First, let's go under the View menu, go to Show, and look at the grid. As you can see, it puts a very fine grid all over your photo. We're going to hide that for just a moment, and we're going to actually modify this grid. So go under the Photoshop menu, go here to Preferences, and choose Guides, Grids, and Slices right there. I'm zooming in for you. Guides, Grid, and Slices. So just click right on that. It brings up the preferences. And down here you see Grid. See where it says grid line every 1 inch? You're going to change inches to percent. And you're going to ask for a grid line every 33 1/3%. And then for subdivisions, you're just going to change it to 1. That's all you have to do. Change the grid line to 33 1/3%, change the subdivisions to 1, and click OK. Now when you go back, View, Show, Grid, you've got your thirds already marked out there. And you would want to put your object of interest here, 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 or here. You want to put your horizon line up here or up here. You don't want to put anything in this square in the middle unless you're doing target practice. Now the thing about this tip is it's going to stay like that with the rule of thirds here until you either change it or turn it off. There's a little keyboard shortcut to turn it off. On Mac it's Command and the apostrophe key, and on PC it's Control and the apostrophe key. But it's going to stay in those thirds until you go back to the preferences and change them. So that's my little tip on rule of thirds after the fact in Photoshop.
Very, very cool. Now, we're at this point going to hear from Matt, who is always the one looking at our blog to see what people are asking, and he's going to try and address some of the questions we get on our blog.
He's going to try and address them.
I'm sure he will very successfully.
Okay.
I think he will,
Okay,
yes.
good.
All right, thank you, Scott, for that vote of confidence. I appreciate that my boss thinks I can do it. No. All right, so next up here, we've got I'm going to answer some questions from our Q&A blog, which if this is your first time watching, you don't know what I'm talking about. If you go to Photoshop TV, each episode, you have an opportunity to comment, and we answer questions that we take off of that website. So it's photoshoptv.com. All right, so the first question actually comes from the blog, but I get a lot of emails on it too. People ask us what kind of gear that we're using up here. So we use two different laptops. We use Apple and Dell. We use 15-inch PowerBooks, and I've got a Dell M70, Precision M70 here. It's 2 gigahertz with 2 mega RAM in it. So
2 mega RAM. That's
Yes.
will it even launch Photoshop in 2 mega RAM?
Yes, it will.
Did you mean maybe 2 giga RAM?
No. Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, 2 giga RAM. I failed him.
No, you're doing good, Matt. Go.
Thank you. 2 giga RAM. Scott, what do you got?
I've got a PowerBook, 15-inch PowerBook, 1.5 megahertz with 2 giga RAM and 2 mega RAM just in case.
Yes.
On a
What do you got,
sidecar,
Dave?
on an XMP sidecar.
I have both a laptop from Apple and Dell, both of which I know nothing about, except they work quite nicely for
Hey,
me.
I have a Dell M20 too.
the-
I have a Dell M20. It's maxed out. It's got as much RAM and stuff as they'll fit in it, and I love it. It's great. It's a great little computer.
And Dave, I've actually used Dave. Dave's got the M60. So
Thank you, sir.
Ooh, yes, the
very
M60.
similar to the one I'm using here. So that's the question on our gear. And next, Mark actually wrote in. He says he wanted to know if I could explain the difference between the Wacom Graphire tablet and the Intuos. So last week we did a little tutorial on the Wacom tablets. The essential difference is the Intuos is kind of the pro model. The Graphire is not. So there's a lot of pressure sensitivity difference in the pens and the tablets. Also, the Intuos has this little touch strip on it, and it's got these quick keyboard shortcuts. So you don't, when you're using the tablet, you don't have to resort back to the keyboard. You can do it all right on the tablet. So that's it from our Q&A blog. Again, go to photoshoptv.com and go ahead and post us a question there. And let's go over to Larry for the Nap Minute.
Thanks, Matt. Today I'm in the web department, and I want to introduce you to the web guys. So let me call over the head web guy. His name is Jim. Come on over, Jim. Say hi to Photoshop TV. Brett, turn around. This is Photoshop TV. This is Brett. Over here we have Fred and Tommy. And these are the guys that are responsible for both the public and the private site, the members-only side of the site. And thanks very much, guys. I'll let you get back to work. I know you're busy. I want to let you know what these guys are putting on the website just for our members. This week what we have is a tutorial from Lisa Snyder. She's our graphics editor, and she's done a tutorial on correcting and updating PDF files. We also have a couple videos for members only on the members site. One's from Matt Kloskowski, and it's a part 2 of web photo galleries in Photoshop. And then also Dave Cross's video this week is about using color range to do selections in Photoshop. That's for members only, just at the NAP website. And that's it for the NAP update this week. To you, Scott.
Thank you, Larry. And if you're wondering why you always hear like phones ringing in the background and people talking and walking through our set, it's because we actually broadcast from the graphics department at the National Association of Photoshop Professionals, where they produce Photoshop User Magazine. And what a great segue about Dave's tip, because the tip Dave is about to do was actually featured in an issue of Photoshop User Magazine. If you're not getting Photoshop User Magazine, go to photoshopuser.com and find out why. Here's a tip from Mr. Cross.
Yes, thank you. This is a tip that I did in a regular feature we have where we answer people's questions. And this was, how can I apply a filter to type without rasterizing it? So let's take a look. All right, well, the real answer is you can't, because if you try to apply a filter, for example, if I went to do something like Texturizer,
I
it
use
will
that one
ask
all the
me,
time.
Yes, Texturizer, a very good filter, but it says it's going to have to rasterize it. You don't want to do that because
run that on me.
you would lose the ability, I'm just going to ignore them and keep going, you would lose the ability to edit your type. So what you do instead is add a new layer. Now let's actually just pick up the same color. We're going to fill that whole layer with green. So if you look at my layers palette, you can see that I've effectively covered up the type. But here's what we do. We now apply the Texturizer filter, if I can get to it. There we go.
I feel like I'm being ignored.
Very much so. And it will open up the incredibly enormous Texturizer dialog box. And we'll just say that's absolutely perfect just the way it is. Actually, let's not. Let's use like this.
Yeah,
that looks more like
yeah.
AstroTurf or something.
Oh, there you
yes,
go. That's
there we
beautiful.
Go. So now we have a nice texturized layer above the type, and all you do, you can do this a couple of ways. You can position your mouse right on the border between the two layers, hold down the Option or Alt key and click, and look at that. The texture is still there, but this is still type. Look. Ooh.
Ooh. Yes.
That's very cool.
Ooh, you applied a filter.
A filter to a layer in group with previous.
All right, at long last, it is contest time. First, we're going to look at who won last week's prize. Remember, last week's prize was the home dock for iPod from Digital Lifestyle Outfitters. This lets you connect your iPod to your TV, and you can listen to it. And if you have iPod video, you can watch video and music and blah, blah, blah. It connects it. It's wonderful. It's the fabulous best Christmas gift.
Don't throw it.
And I will not throw it. And you also got the iPod book, sold wherever fine books are sold. You get both of these. Who won last week's contest?
No idea.
Dave knows.
Mike Murphy from Westminster
Mike
Mall.
Murphy from Massachusetts.
Massachusetts.
All right, so congratulations to Mike for winning those. And this week's contest, of course, we're going to win the Adobe backpack you saw earlier, packed with books and prizes, and Matt's brand new DVD on automating Photoshop CS2. What's the question? The question, who knows the question?
Right, well, we're going to show you a graphic of the layers palette, and there's two graphics. So here's what you start out. You're looking like this. What keystroke do you press to make it look like this? So to go from A to B, which will make a lot more sense when the visual graphic is up on the screen.
Yes.
And we will accept two answers because there's different possible answers for CS2 and earlier versions of Photoshop.
And essentially, let me just clarify, essentially what we did there is you had your layers palette, and everything in that layers palette was just on that very top layer. So how do you do that? There's
the keyboard shortcut?
I'm not going to say anything. I'm going to give it away.
He's not going to give it away. All right, so send in your entries to Photoshop TV at photoshopuser.com, or go by our website, try to post it there at photoshoptv.com. Can they do that? Can they post it in the blog?
Well, but then everybody sees it.
Don't post it in the blog. Bad.
By December 16th.
Bad blog.
By December 16th.
December 16th.
All right, well, that's it for this week's show. Before we go, I want to say a shout out. That's the term, right? Shout out. A shout out to Tina. No. A shout out to, well, just a big hello to our friends that are watching us in the UK. We have people watching us in Singapore, in the UK, in Shanghai, China, and all over Europe. And so thank you guys for your emails and for watching Photoshop TV. On behalf of myself and Dave Cross.
Good day.
Matt Klaskowski.
Good day, eh?
He's rocking the house key. We'll see you guys next week on Photoshop TV.